How long it would all take to kill, we don't know, but nonetheless, the killing effects of huge volcanic eruptions are deadly, and they've happened many times.
What qualifies something as a mass extinction?
I think it's important to realize that species don't live forever. So actually, each species lives for maybe 1 million years, and that includes humans, Homo sapiens, T-Rex. But a mass extinction means that there's a whole lot of species going right at the same time. And the most famous one, of course, was when all the dinosaurs disappeared, or should I say the final dinosaurs. I mean, dinosaurs had been on the Earth for 150 million years, so they weren't all living side by side. But a mass extinction is where there's an unusually large number of species disappearing at the same time, and not just one group like dinosaurs, but across everything, So normally they're kind of ecologically broad, so marine creatures, creatures on land, plants, etc., etc.
Are we in one now?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think people commonly say yes, if we allow that a mass extinction could last over a few hundred years, a few thousand years. We need to scale what's happening at the present time back towards the past. But certainly some of the estimates would say we're pretty near it.
My idea was kind of to run through the 5 big ones that have happened, but I'm going to absolutely butcher the names of them that I looked up. So feel free to be like, that's not even close, buddy. The Ordovician?
Ordovician, not bad, not bad. So, yeah, do you want to go through the big 5 and I can...
Yeah.
So, the way we talk about mass extinctions, paleontologists, the people who study fossils, have recognized that there were these events, and they're not in dispute. People accept these. But it's important to note that there were many other events. So the club, this top club of the big 5, could be joined arguably by another 4 or 5, according to different people. So the Ordovician was one that it was only observed in the oceans because there wasn't any life on land, really. There were big changes in the major beasts on the ocean floor, and it seems to be associated with a kind of freezing event. So this is over 400 million years ago. The next one was in the late Devonian, and there were definite extinctions that we would notice, like losses of armored fish. There were amazing fish in the earlier part of the Devonian, and they had heavy armor on the outside. There's nothing living really like them. And there were lots of changes of plants and so on land. And that seems to be, well, it was in 2 parts, but one of them seems to be associated with big volcanic eruptions. And then 250 million years ago was the really big one at the end of the Permian. And we identify it as really big because something like only about 5 or 10% of species survived. So that was really huge. All of the others, about 50% of species survived. But 5%, that's 1 in 20. And that's as near as, damn it, to, complete extinction of everything. And that was the end of lots and lots of marine creatures that had been around for a long time. The corals, the reefs disappeared. And on land, the forests disappeared. So it's not just that you're losing species, you're kind of losing a whole habitat, a whole system. And like on the Earth today, forests are really important as places for life. And in the oceans, of course, reefs are really important. So they went. And we can see the scale of it, excuse me, because it took 10 million years for them to rebuild. And then at the end of the Triassic, 200 million years ago, there was a further extinction event that affected life in the oceans and on land. And sometimes you mark an extinction event by opportunity. And at this point, the dinosaurs took off. So the other groups had been wiped out. The dinosaurs were already there. They'd been doing quite well, but they'd not really taken over. And they took over completely. And then finally, at the end of the Cretaceous, the famous one that everybody knows about, 66 million years ago, disappearance of the dinosaurs, also the pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, the marine reptiles, things like plesiosaurs. Also ammonites, if anybody is a fossil collector, the ammonites are these coiled fossils that are very common in the Jurassic and Cretaceous. They went, and lots of other things. And it's also marked by opportunity, because the loss of the dinosaurs enabled the rise of the mammals, and the loss of various of these marine creatures enabled the rise of modern type sharks and various other things like that. And the main feature that marks them out is that life was disappearing in all habitats, in the oceans and on land.
Is there something that you would say that they all had in common?
Most of them are explained by volcanic eruption. And so this has become clear in the last 10 or 20 years that, and they're called hyperthermals, meaning very high temperature, because that's the key feature. I should have stressed that with the impact, you actually get cooling. So it's important to bear in mind that the end of the dinosaurs is associated with lowering temperature because of the blacking out of the sun. But when it's a volcanic caused event, it's warming mainly. And this is because of the gases. So, of course, we think of volcanoes. You don't want to get too close to an erupting volcano because you'll get swept away in the molten lava. Well, yeah, of course. And with a big volcanic eruption, that would have a big effect, but not worldwide. The worldwide effects come from the gases that come out of the volcano. And there are multiple kinds of gases come out of all volcanoes. Some of them, like sulfur dioxide, has a quick effect. It has a cooling effect. But when sulfur dioxide mixes with water and oxygen in the atmosphere, it produces sulfuric acid, which isn't good. And it has a bad effect, not only in killing the trees, but it leaches away nutrients from the soil. And so that part of forests that are maybe affected by acid rain can stay blasted and bleak for centuries, because it takes a long time for the soil to redevelop and acquire the minerals that are needed by the plants and so on. But when you have a volcanic eruption on a global scale, well, let me reword that. When you have a huge volcanic eruption, that it can actually have effects over the whole of the Earth. And most of those effects are partly from the sulfur dioxide, but partly from the greenhouse gases. And there's a whole bunch of greenhouse gases that come out of volcanoes, particularly carbon dioxide, but also methane and water vapor. And all of these greenhouse gases have a warming effect. And although the sulfur dioxide has a cooling effect, it's fairly transient. That's quick. That's done. And the warming effects can last for much longer, not just a few days. They can last for months. So this is what is happening. The two things combined give you the killing effects of the hyperthermal, the heating. The warming is the key thing, coupled with acid rain. So this is what was happening at the end of the Permian and at the end of the Triassic, and probably at the end of the Devonian, at least, those other big five. And the killing then on land, it's because the trees and other plants are killed by the acid rain. The warming has a huge effect, because if you raise the temperature by 5 degrees, 10 degrees, life can't survive that. We think that many plants and animals are happy at hot temperatures. Well, not really. Anything above 30 C is really not acceptable, 35. And so life will move. But then they get crowded, because you're clearing out the very diverse tropics, which have much more life in them than any other part of the world. In the oceans, the main effect is from high temperature and acid. The acid will acidify the waters, and a lot of marine animals have shells that are made of calcium carbonate, so things like mollusks, shellfish, and even crabs and lobsters, their shell is made of calcium carbonate, and many others, and the acid will just eat away at that, and they can't really survive. So how long it would all take to kill, we don't know, but nonetheless, the killing effects of huge volcanic eruptions are deadly, and they've happened many times.